Alright, Bomb Squad, listen up. Today, at the edge of our hope, at the end of our time, we have chosen not only to believe in ourselves, but in movie night. Today, we face the viewers/listeners at our door and bring the movie good to them. Today, we are reviewing Pacific Rim. Hi, I am Tim M. Sullivan, and with me I have...
Hi, I'm 𝐿𝐴, and this traffic jam is making me exhausted.
Hi, I'm 𝐼𝐵𝐼𝐻𝐼𝐼𝐻.
Hi, I'm the guy that had a mental breakdown last episode.
And we have two special guests. First, we have returning for her third appearance on the show, my partner in crime and my co-pilot in this Jaeger.
Cody Johnson.
Coming on the show for the first time.
Hi, PMC Trilogy.
Yeah.
Woo. There we go.
Tell us a bit about yourself.
I'm a big fan of mechs. I stream a lot of mechs on Twitch, and I also like to talk about mechs on podcasts.
Hell yeah.
It is now 2 a.m., and the giant robot still hasn't moved.
As I alluded to earlier, we are talking about the 2013 Guillermo del Toro giant robot versus kaiju flick Pacific Rim. For our opening question, we're going to talk about our favorite kaiju movies. So we're going to start with Ethan. What's your favorite kaiju movie?
I'm legally obligated to cheat on this one in some capacity, because I watch too many of these stupid things. In terms of, like, serious affection for the craft, it's gotta be 𝐏𝐻𝐼𝐿 2, The Attack of Legion. It's just really impressive from a technical level. It's serious. It has a weird parody dub by ADV, the Lake Texarkana dub, where it restages the events of the film to be in Arkansas, and it's just incredible.
Uh-oh. Hey, Ardell, look at this. It's connected dots.
Harford, what the hell have you done to this TV?
Well, I didn't do nothing. I just knocked my bear over accidentally, and I think I screwed something
Well,
up.
sure as hell wasn't doing that when I left the room a minute ago.
Well, it ain't my fault. It's not like I went to school or nothing.
Legion is like this magnificent puppet that I adore to death. My actual like all-time favorite, that's a bit lighter, is one of my first. It's Son of Godzilla. Of all titles, maybe a weird one. But Son of Godzilla perfectly captures a gentle comedy. The human stuff is really endearing. There's a King Kong sensibility to it. Godzilla's dynamic with his son, 𝐼𝐵𝐼𝐻, is immensely charming. There's some actually pretty solid kaiju action too. Kumonga and Kamacuras, the giant spider at the end, and the mantis you see throughout the film respectively, are genuinely terrifying insect giant monsters that I love. And the finale of Godzilla and 𝐼𝐵𝐼𝐻 walking off into the snow together to hibernate is genuinely beautiful. And the kind of thing that strikes you. It is a dad's rock movie, absolutely, and I love it to death.
Nice. All right. Joe, take it away.
Alright, so I'm a basic bitch when it comes to kaiju movies. So for my answer, I gotta go with the OG, baby. It's Gojira, or Godzilla, as we call it here in America.
Hell yeah! I do not want to disappoint our Japanese public, especially Godzilla.
That original Godzilla, or Gojira, it is a really friggin' good movie. It's a very terrifying movie when you consider the cultural and historical context behind it. It's just a very, like, impressively made movie for that era. That whole franchise is dedicated to that one movie being so successful, even though it strayed so fucking far from its horror roots. I do have two honorable mentions that didn't quite make the cut because their kaiju scenes only last maybe like the finale of their movies.
We've got a freaking kaiju up in this
But my two honorable mentions go to Frankenweenie for having a giant turtle at the end, basically looking like Gamera, and the Powerpuff Girls movie. The show has dabbled in kaiju, and it does have a giant Mojo Jojo kaiju at the end of that movie, so, you know, it kinda sorta counts.
Hell yeah. Interestingly, you brought up the historical context of Godzilla. There's been a lot of talk recently about films to pair with Oppenheimer, and like a lot of people going for Grave of the Fireflies or Barefoot Gen. I genuinely think that like Godzilla would be a good follow-up and Oppenheimer would make it that much more horrifying.
Yes.
Moving on, PMC, give us some kaiju flicks.
So I'm gonna have two answers for you. One of them I think is gonna be very maybe boring, which is of the kaiju films I've seen in their entirety, my favorite's probably gonna be Shin Godzilla. That was a movie I had the fortune to watch at Stephen Hero's bachelor party, and then everyone else fell asleep. They were all younger than me, but I love that movie. That movie is riveting, incredible soundtrack. I love people in rooms talking, and of course that that movie is full of that.
Japan has grown up enough to have international trade deals on the sly.
We got good results on a coagulant, but formulating it is one thing.
Well, this certainly explains why the U.S. Department of Energy moved so quickly.
And to be accurate, Article 76 stipulates...
It's been 1 week since you looked at me. Cock your head to the side and said I'm angry.
Outstanding. Really enjoyed that. I want to give an honorable mention to a PlayStation 1 game, 𝐏𝐚𝐬 2000, which, if you're not familiar with, has a ton of really good live-action cutscenes, great monster design. If you just want to see a bunch of cool monsters and also your friend 𝐏𝐚𝐬, watch a playthrough of 𝐏𝐚𝐬 2000.
Hell yeah, you stole my answer. All right, Cody, favorite kaiju movie?
My answer is also going to be pretty basic because it's this movie, it's Pacific Rim. This movie is what introduced me to kaiju movies. I didn't know the term before then. I just called all of them monster movies. I didn't really realize it was its own genre. And I discovered that I really like them through this movie. And even though I do really like them, I still haven't actually seen that many of them in their entirety.
I'm working my way up doing the Pacific Rim thing right now. You get what I mean? Good luck with that.
So, safest answer is this movie. It's Pacific Rim.
Fair enough. We watch a lot of kaiju stuff lately, but it's just like we have the Godzilla channel on Pluto TV just on a loop. So we're not like actually paying attention to the movies, they're just on in the background, we're just seeing people in suits fighting. It's great. Austin, favorite kaiju movie?
For me, kaiju movies are sort of like giallo films or classic documentaries. As in, there's a lot of important ones that I haven't seen yet. I grew up with a VHS copy of King Kong vs. Godzilla and the shameful 1998 American Godzilla film, but my studies never extended far beyond these, except for that time in 2008 when everybody was going nuts for the Cloverfield monster. But I do still have a favorite, and it towers way above the others in terms of quality. I'd imagine this is sort of a generic answer, but I'd say Shin Godzilla was everything I ever wanted out of a Godzilla movie. I wrote this down beforehand. Watching mankind's favorite giant lizard go through disgusting puberty, boyhood style, was awesome in a kind of horrific way. Then juxtaposing the freaky large-scale action with these scenes of political figures in boardrooms dicking around and not getting the problem solved was really funny. Not a very deep cut on my part. I'm not winning any points for creativity here, especially now, but at least I didn't say Ghostbusters. Back to you, Tim.
Hell yeah. Good picks all around. I do want to bring up some honorable mentions. I have to mention End of Evangelion, but I enjoyed that more as a weird, experimental, existential movie than as a kaiju movie.
Shinji!
Dad?
Pilot this robot!
No!
Well, there goes that plan.
I also want to shout out Big Man Japan, just because I fucking love Big Man Japan. It's like half mockumentary, half like actual kaiju movie, and then at the end it just becomes a toku thing where a dude in a suit is just whooping the bad guy's ass. It's hilarious. But yeah, I'm just gonna hammer it on the head. 3 out of 6, Shin Godzilla, let's go.
Yeah!
Shin Godzilla is just so good. It's easily the best Godzilla movie to come after the original. Like, it's one of the few Godzilla movies that I think really gets the human stuff right. That's, I think, always lacking, and, you know, you're just waiting for the monster stuff, but I think it's very interesting in this movie, and then when you get to the monster stuff, it's absolutely horrifying, which is, again, something that's rare. A lot of the fights in Godzilla movies tend to be campy and silly, which I love it, but Shin Godzilla just brought it to a whole new level, and you've got the Evangelion score in there too, which we gotta shout that out too. But enough of that, enough of Shin Godzilla. We're talking about Pacific Rim today. So let's get into our thoughts on Pacific Rim. We're starting with Cody.
I don't know if I can have any like super objective thoughts about this movie because I watched it at a time when I was going through some really severe like burnout and anxiety and depression. So, and that this movie was kind of like my lifeline for a while. It was what was keeping me going. I can't really criticize it too much, even though there are like valid criticisms of this movie. I love everything about it. The art style, all of Guillermo del Toro's signature pieces. I love all the actors in this movie. I love the soundtrack. And if you let me talk about this for too long, I'm gonna start like info dumping about all the lore that's not in the movie. So you might want to pick somebody else.
Okay. All right, let's go to Ethan. Thoughts on Pacific Rim?
When I first saw the promotional material for this film, my thoughts were, yes, that's 𝐏𝐚𝐽. I love 𝐏𝐏𝐽. 𝐏𝐏𝐽 is dumb, and I love it. And I vaguely had the idea, oh yeah, Guillermo del Toro saw that. 𝐿 was the dubbed version of 𝐏𝐏𝐽, and it showed in Latin America. Apparently didn't make its way to Mexico until like 2014, 2015. He might have seen it through like VHS tapes, but his ass was probably not watching 𝐏𝐏𝐽, so I feel like a fool. But it still kind of reminds me of 𝐏𝐏𝐽, specifically because the 2 robot pilots. That's a thing that's happened in like a handful of anime and different productions. 𝐏𝐏𝐽 is the one that jumps out most prominently. That's where the name 𝐮𝐧𝐢𝐵𝐵𝐼𝐻𝑚𝐻 comes from. The crummy English dub of that show is Magnos the Robot.
We call them the Paleogoths. What in the world are they? In the first place, they're not from this world. I believe them to be aliens led by the ancient and evil Xerxes, Tyre,
But the other ones are another 𝐏𝐚𝐽 work, 𝐻𝐼𝐴𝐻. 𝐏𝐚𝐽 heavily influencing this film through his signature creation, 𝐻𝐼𝐳𝐵𝐾𝐳, and Dinosaur War 𝐰𝐵𝐵𝐻𝑚𝐻, which is a very bad thing. Like tokusatsu, but with animated characters, but the monster fights are with suited characters. It's very bad. But that's the thing is, most of those shows, those works with like 2 robot pilots are bad. So man, it's really nice having a work with 2 robot pilots where it's good. Hey, what do you know? You can make a good one of those.
Now we have a choice here. We either sit and wait or we take these flare guns and do something really stupid.
Yeah, it's a film that kind of wears its inspirations on its sleeve. I think it has a lot of effective action throughout. It's still, you know, sort of working in a 2013 visual effects space, and there's a sense that they're a bit self-conscious of it, so that they're trying to obscure things a bit with particle effects and shooting at night. But also, I like when things are shot at night, kind of. That can be effective in its own right. And I think that's sort of mitigated by like the floodlights on the mechs themselves and the bioluminescence of the kaiju. I think that helps you get a more distinct sense of their silhouette than something like the Transformers films, certainly. Another big thing is on the commentary for this film, Guillermo del Toro mentions that the animators didn't use motion capture at all. It was all hand animated, and you would get a really good sense of that. It does feel like real classic stop motion animation during several sequences. I have a particular film in mind that I want to compare this to that I'll probably mention in more general discussion, but it kind of reminds me of that film. And overall, I think it's just a generally effective mecha romp. It captures a lot of the things that you'd want from something like that. The action is good, the designs are all fairly distinct, and it tells a pretty tight sort of story, all things considered. I think it really was like Guillermo del Toro approached this with, I want to make a really good blockbuster. I don't really want to go anything beyond that. I want to make a really good blockbuster that, like, if I saw this film when I was, you know, 10 or 12 going to the theater, I would be hooting and or hollering the entire time. And for that, I think he absolutely succeeded.
Hell yeah. I'm glad you brought up the anime influence. I know he has explicitly stated Pat Labor was an influence on the film, which sounds a little odd, but like, I kind of get it. Like, it does sort of have the structure of a cop movie. Like, it's a guy whose partner died and now he has to get a new partner. It's the story you've seen before, but now it's got giant robots.
I can't have anyone else in my head again.
Haven't you heard, Mr. Beckett? The world is coming to an end. So where would you rather die? Here? Or in a Jaeger?
Austin, thoughts on Pacific Rim?
You know, I was actually really disappointed in this movie when it came out. I grew up loving G Gundam, so before this release, I was actually very excited that like a mecha movie was getting the big Hollywood treatment. Sometimes though, young Austin was wrong about movies. Like for example, I used to hate Eraserhead. So I figured now that I'm 10 years older and know a lot more about film stuff, that maybe Pacific Rim would be better on a rewatch. So here's my take. There's 2 sides of Pacific Rim. There's Pacific Rim as a visual experience, and Pacific Rim is an adventure movie with science fiction elements. As a visual experience, Pacific Rim is extremely generous, and even to this day, sort of a novelty. Even now, there is no Hollywood movie that has done giant fighting robots on this scale with this level of realism, and almost every inch of this film is packed with elements custom designed for the film. Home Media presents this film at 1.78 by 1, which means your whole widescreen TV transforms into a window full of a million little doodads and tiny panels with shit written on them. God, I wish this film didn't have a 2K digital intermediate. I understand they barely got these insane VFX shots rendered in 2K, but man, we live in a cruel world when the Will Smith movie Hancock is in native 4K and Pacific Rim caps out at 2K. Balls!
Jeez.
But beyond the marvelous visuals, like I said, there's Pacific Rim as an adventure movie with science fiction elements, or Pacific Rim as a screenplay being performed by actors. This right here is the reason there aren't a bunch of, like, slow newsday articles about how Pacific Rim is actually an overlooked masterpiece. I have micro-scale complaints. Charlie Hunnam couldn't sell Inner Turmoil if he worked for a weapons manufacturer. And Riko Kikuchi needs to close her mouth before a bug lands in there on accident. I also have macro-scale complaints, like that 40-minute chunk between Yancey's death and Ron Perlman's introduction, dragging so hard it reminded me of the pit sequence in The Dark Knight Rises. Mostly, though, it's the two leads. Their shoddy dialogue, their wooden performances, and the movie put a lot of its poker chips in betting you'd like these two people, which creates kind of an uneven experience overall.
I don't think you're the right man for this mission.
Aww. As a VFX enthusiast, though, I still have to say Pacific Rim is one of a kind, wildly ambitious, and has a whole bevy of neat, like, making up shit to be discussed. This was ILM after all, and co-creator of Photoshop, John motherfucking Knoll, was involved. Hopefully I can drop some knowledge in general discussion. But to end my review, Pacific Rim is a rare, beautiful machine with a dazzling exterior, but sadly, its core processor was made by Hewlett-Packard.
Fair enough. I'm glad you at least came around to it as a visual experience.
Yeah, that's undeniable.
For sure. PMC, thoughts on Pacific Rim?
So I'm coming back to this film. I definitely enjoyed it the first time around. Coming back to it, after spending a lot of time talking about robots in a critical analysis sort of situation, I was really taken with the way it deployed, the drifting concept, both in terms of character development and in terms of the plot. It's not only used to build bonds between various characters, father, son, all the family dynamics, the budding romantic potential of our leads, whether or not we buy it, and then various other complications that arise from that. Also, the way it's used to give us an insight into the aliens. I think it's very cute that it's done to do that as well. So there's like a plot exposition enabling element to it as well. So it's very, very efficient way. And I do think, as Ethan kind of said earlier, it's finally somebody's really using this thing. It's really nice to see. I really appreciate that.
Marco, listen to me. This is just a memory. None of it is real.
And beyond that, it's just a candy store of references. One of the great things about classic great robots, Giant Robo or Big O, is that they always have another, trick in their bag. There's always an extra sword. Sometimes there's a boat. There's just always something really, really fun to work with. So I was just very taken with that on a rewatch. And I love too that the final moment, as wooden as the leads were, I was very happy with the ending when they don't have to say anything to each other because they drifted. They're already in each other's heads, which I felt was actually like the one time that sort of like pull back. Okay, I'm ready for the credits now. We can just do that. Which I will mention that I was watching with my partner, and she was really upset that they weren't talking to each other or responding on the radio. And I was like, no, they're drifting. They're drift compatible. They did it. They achieved it. So pretty happy on a rewatch. Definitely delighted to have revisited the film.
Nice. Joe, thoughts on Pacific Rim?
My history with this goes back to when it came out, and I was like this big Guillermo del Toro fan, and I remember this movie being hyped to oblivion. It was del Toro's first movie since Hellboy 2. It had been years since he had made like a movie. And he's back, baby, and this is gonna be the movie that gets him out of director jail. Oh, poor Guillermo. Poor Guillermo. Got taken down by Adam Sandler.
I'm so sad. I'm so f***ed up.
This movie was also probably my first date with my first very serious partner. It was a good date. It was a really good date, but my ex and I don't really talk anymore, and it was kind of a messy breakup, but...
Only listen to me!
After that breakup, I'd always been afraid to revisit this movie, and I've revisited it a couple of times, and I still really, really enjoy it, thank God. I think what I really like about this movie in particular is the fact that it's Guillermo del Toro basically saying, okay, I've done all the artsy stuff, I did it in a superhero movie, it failed, I might as well just say f it and make a big, fun, dumb action movie. And you know what? He knows how to f***ing deliver. It just gives you what you need to know and then just throws you into it. I will agree that it is a little rough watching Charlie Hunnam try to act his way through this movie. It's not that good of a performance, but I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt. Movies like this especially, it cannot be easy to act and deliver lines like he's given in this, so I gotta give him at least brownie points for trying.
Marshall, can we just talk about this for 1 second?
Look at me. I'm Black Superman. Young man, you got knocked the f*** out.
Charlie Day stands the hell out. He's the most fun character in this, and I f***ing hate what they did to him in the sequel. I hate that sequel so f***ing much. But, you know, I love that character so much. I dressed up as him for Halloween the year that this movie came out.
Rock and roll.
Okay, guess who's back, you one-eyed bitch? You owe me a kaiju brain.
The visual effects of this movie, except for one little bit, and that's at the very beginning, the Golden Gate Bridge sequence, where it kind of looks like a PlayStation 2 game for a little bit. The rest of the movie really f***ing looks spectacular. There is one scene I definitely want to discuss a little bit, but we'll save that for general discussion. Movie good. Back to you, Tim.
Hell yeah. Good takes all around. To start my thoughts, I want to talk a little bit about what Legendary Pictures kind of went on to do. So, like, the year after this came out, of course, was the 2014 Godzilla movie, which sparked the MonsterVerse, which has thus far had 4 titles. There's also, of course, a sequel to this film that they made. I don't think any of those movies have the same spark that this one does. I think what helps this one is that Guillermo del Toro didn't f***ing direct those other ones. He directed this one, and he absolutely put his chops into it. I always have a great time watching it. He absolutely puts his heart and soul into, like, the designs. Like, you've got great monster designs, great mech designs. I definitely want to agree with Joe on Charlie Day is a standout in this movie. So is Ron Perlman. Both of those characters are so good. Of course, Idris Elba, I think, is probably the biggest performance that, like, you glom onto through this movie. Every time I see that "we're canceling the apocalypse" speech, like, it just gets me pumped.
Today we are canceling the
Bomb Squad.
I'm ruined.
But yeah, a lot of good stuff to talk about. We'll get a little more into it in general discussion. But first, we're going to take a quick ad break, and we'll be right back.
And he's like... I swear it was like the opening scene to the movie Pacific Rim.
And welcome back to our program. And now we're going to give you some sponsored content. You ever watch that movie Interstellar? You know that part where he goes to Plaid? Would you like that on your wall? Well, we've got a website for you, moviepalette.com, a place where you can find small palettes of canvas that contain thin lines representing the dominant colors of each frame of a movie. I got one up there for the film Mandy, and you can get one probably for Pacific Rim, maybe even for Uprising if you want it. If you go to moviepalette.com, you can use the promo code SQUAD15 to get 15% off your order. Also, the entertainment industry is in shambles right now. SAG-AFTRA and the WGA are on strike to try and get good working conditions. So please consider donating to one of these funds, the Entertainment Community Fund, the Snack List, or Groceries for Writers. Today, we're canceling bad working conditions. And now, back to the show. We're gonna go into some general discussion.
Okay, so that movie I was alluding to earlier, that's Robot Jox, baby. The Stuart Gordon directed, Joe Haldeman co-written classic. It's probably my favorite giant robot, like live-action Hollywood film, which is, again, a lot of caveats. I like Pacific Rim a lot, but Robot Jox has stop-motion robots staged in an open plain, full lighting, nothing to obstruct my view of their beautiful bodies as they engage in gladiatorial combat. The stop motion is really good. That's honestly the thing that really cemented just how pretty Pacific Rim often is, particularly that way of kind of, it's a normal way of moving, but when you kind of curve your arm inwards when you walk forward and the way that weight is conveyed, Robot Jox does that a lot, and that's reflected in Pacific Rim quite a bit. The sense of weight is very much in Pacific Rim. Also, the interface, the way people like walk with the bits kind of attached to them is very, very reminiscent of the way it's done in Robot Jox, which is pretty much identical, aside from, you know, the two people being in the cockpit bit. Robot Jox also has a bit where they briefly go into space, only that's an aerial dogfight with robots, because Robot Jox has everything. They have transformations from bipedal mechs to tank mechs to quadruped mechs. A genuinely quite good, if a bit silly, love story. A criticism of capitalism, crashing and or burning. Robot Jox whips and is, I think, even more than like the anime inspiration or like Ultraman, the thing that I see like the most DNA in Pacific Rim in a lot of ways, at least the robot stuff.
So I know there's been like a bunch of different pieces of media that came after Pacific Rim. Like there was the sequel, obviously. There was like a comic tie-in. There's also an anime on Netflix, which we watched the first episode of before this recording. It is serviceable. That's about all I can say for it. Like, it's fine, but, you know, why would I watch an okay Pacific Rim anime when I could watch any mech anime?
Kind of like how The Walking Dead's quality was partially tied to Frank Darabont, and then when he left, it's just not the same. Like, it's hard to make Pacific Rim without Del Toro.
I have, like, two very small things. Building off of something that Joe mentioned earlier about how this was, like, the first movie Del Toro had directed in about 5 years. I was reading some interviews to prep for this, and Del Toro mentioned that he very specifically made the time between when Raleigh like last piloted a Jaeger and when he was finally getting back into it, a 5-year gap, because he kind of related to the whole like getting back into the saddle type feeling and kind of like not being prepared and like being worried that he wasn't going to be able to do this again, which I thought was interesting, and I had never made that connection. And also, Tanner is not here for this, and this is a very Dad's Rock movie, so I have to do it for him. Dad's Rock, baby!
Yes! Yeah, this movie takes place in the distant year of 2025. Can't wait to get my Jaeger.
Because I remember the opening, like, Jaeger fight takes place in 2020. Remember when we were fighting a pandemic and kaiju, guys?
No. What happened was the aliens saw the film. They realized, well, clearly this isn't going to work out. So instead...
the Charlie Day alien ran in and said, the plane's not going to work! And they launched the virus instead.
The Charlie Day-alien.
Oh my god.
In preparing for this, I read a magazine issue Ethan gave me. In Cinefex issue 135, there's a write-up in it by this guy named Joe Fordham, and it explains a bunch of neat VFX stuff. Did you guys know if you want to blow up a building that's real, like if there's a real-life building, you want to put, you know, reconstruct it in CGI in your movie and you want to destroy it, you actually have to call the person who owns the building and ask for permission? Because apparently they called a bunch of people in Hong Kong, because there's a lot of famous buildings in the Hong Kong skyline, and they were like, hey, can we destroy these buildings with a kaiju battle? And the majority of them were like, no, I did not know you needed permission to do that. I thought this was America.
You can't just blow up your building? What? Come on.
It's not even your building, it's a model of the building.
I rewatched some interviews that Del Toro did as like a promotional thing for Toonami the week that the movie came out, and like he was talking about the practical stuff that they designed, and like a lot of this movie is practical, which I think is another thing that makes it work really well. Like seeing them in the model Jaeger head is just so cool.
Those sets were 4 stories tall, by the way.
Yeah, like all of the like real shit they were able to just destroy is so cool. Like in that interview, he just kind of chuckles and goes,
I'm a simple creature.
He's just so happy doing this.
All right, so the scene I mentioned in my overall thoughts, I want to bring it up because this scene specifically hits home for me personally as someone with PTSD. Can we talk about that first drift, the PTSD flashback?
Yeah.
Yeah, that scene is really f***ing terrifying to me now, but remove it from context, it might be one of the scariest things Del Toro has ever put to film. The little girl running from the giant f***ing monster.
I liked that they rigged everything on that setup to hydraulics, so the little girl performer could see all the like f***ing shit bouncing around like the Kaiju's footsteps were there in real life, even though, you know, the Kaiju was CGI. It's just funny, the idea of putting a little girl in an alley with a bunch of shit rigged to f***ing bounce around on hydraulics occasionally.
Now I think I understand why she's scared, because she's actually probably f***ing terrified. I'd be scared shitless too, and I'm just like, man, this little girl is just giving it her all. Like, so this is a really good actress. No, she's probably genuinely f***ing terrified on the actual set.
I mean, in fairness, I would also be terrified if Charlie Hunnam was invading my memories.
Yeah, it's not the monster, it's Charlie.
It's a son of anarchy. Quick, hide.
This was already mentioned by the Corridor crew in their like 3rd episode of VFX Artists React, but that shot where the Jaeger fist like bumps into the Nuken's cradle was a cut to a 1/4 scale miniature office. But what they didn't mention was the actual desk with the cradle on it was an actual size desk shot on a motion control rig, stitched into the finished composite. Ha! I did the thing where I added one more detail. Take that, successful YouTubers!
I do want to mention one more Robot Jox connection leading into an actual discussion of the film itself, but the chainsaws that are used on the Chinese Jaeger might also be a callback to Robot Jox, which famously features chainsaw penis, the chainsaw on the Russian robot he uses to chainsaw jam into his enemy's cockpit in one of the most sterling depictions of Freudian imagery set to film for a robot.
Chainsaw Penis versus Tetsuo the Iron Man. Who wins?
Another thing to mention about this film is there's a lot of violence in it, like fairly explicit violence, and it's a real testament to how much you can get away by making the blood not red, because at the end you see that kaiju literally cut in twain, like bisected down the middle. Like there's a lot of that, a lot of goopiness, and even a lot of red blood, just kind of like usually trickling from people's noses. The amount of mental damage done to people in this film is kind of concerning if you're somebody who has like a phobia of prions.
Yeah, it's always crazy when like a PG-13 movie gets away with bisecting somebody in half down the middle, like UHF, the Weird Al movie, Alita Battle Angel, I think. It's just crazy because that's a thing you would expect to see in 13 Ghosts, not Pacific Rim.
You also got the Samurai Jack scene where he just cuts a robot and it spills oil all over his face. It doesn't matter if it's not red blood.
Yeah, that's actually really worth mentioning, is the mecha gore in here is sterling, and that is, I think, very much harkening back to 𝐼𝐵𝐷𝐼𝐴, particularly 𝐼𝐵𝐷𝐼𝐴 versus the General of Darkness, the sort of feature film and that kind of represents the finale of 𝐼𝐵𝐷𝐼𝐴, because 𝐼𝐵𝐷𝐼𝐴 gets torn to pieces in that. And in the ending of 𝐼𝐵𝐷𝐼𝐴, the television series, he also gets wrecked to sort of prepare for the introduction of Great 𝐼𝐵𝐷𝐼𝐴. But there's a lot of really great mecha gore at the end of that, and I feel like that's definitely something Del Toro is pulling on here.
Why wasn't this one of those movies that had a successful toy line after the movie came out? Because it feels like this movie was designed, one, to be a very fun and entertaining, like, good movie, but also to sell f***ing toys. They look like toys!
Where's my 2,500-piece Jaeger Lego set?
It's a movie where Del Toro literally gets to play with f***ing toys. But my second thing is, it's a bit more of a joke. I think Del Toro really understands American culture, because it's very funny that in a movie set in the 2020s, the American government is like very much pushing to build a wall to stop the forces that they don't like.
I noticed that.
Like, it's something that seemed like on the nose, you know, like post-Bush administration even, and then, you know, in 2016, it's like, holy shit, that's just literally what was the marketing strategy for an entire presidency.
We're gonna build a wall and we're gonna make the kaijus pay for it.
It was definitely very affecting to hear Riley talking about how you would want to fight a hurricane while piloting a Jaeger, when in fact climate change has gone so far that a hurricane is in fact impacting the Pacific coast.
Time has made Pacific Rim sadder.
There's no way to get more sad than Ron Perlman losing his shoe. You can't top it. The visual look of this movie was partially inspired by the painting Wanderer Above Sea Fog by Caspar David Friedrich. Anyway, I'm gonna travel back in time and destroy that painting in the hopes there's an alternate timeline created where this movie isn't constantly drenched in water.
Pacific Rim 2, the dry cut.
Yes, give me the dry cut. There is a weird thing where Del Toro is clearly very proud of that throughout the commentary, commenting on this film. That is interesting as an odd thing. I think it's very clearly speaking to later works from him, kind of evoking, and he does explicitly call out the creature from the Black Lagoon, the Gill-Man concept, and, you know, shifting between aquatic shots and the above waterline shots. I don't think it works as well here, but I can understand and respect that enthusiasm for it. That almost makes it more palatable, at least just a little bit.
One comment I wanted to make, just because I have Gunbuster on my brain, I found myself comparing Stacker Pentecost to Coach Oda throughout the film, and of course it turns out they both have radiation sickness, so that was sort of like, I predicted this correctly. But I mean, otherwise than that, you know, they're obviously characters who are trying to save the world, and also avoid talking about their personal trauma.
Yeah, exactly. At least Stacker Pentecost isn't marrying any 17-year-olds.
Yes. Stacker Pentecost thankfully does not lay hands on anyone in a way that none of us need in our lives.
Sonic says, don't do that.
Christ.
That's no good.
Alright, let's get right into it. The return of Tim's Trivia Time. Approximately 100 kaijus and 100 Jaegers were designed. The filmmakers voted on their favorite designs each week to determine which ones would make the film. Del Toro cast Charlie Day as Newt based on his performance in the It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia episode, Charlie Kelly, King of the Rats, where he delivers a monologue lamenting his job of killing rats at the bar.
This set that we're in is the budget of season 1, 2, and 3 of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Just the set.
In an early draft, Raleigh and Mako spoke almost exclusively in different languages until drifting, at which point they begin to understand each other. The designs of the kaijus were made with the notion that they could be worn as suits, like in classic kaiju and tokusatsu media. Ron Perlman kept Hannibal Chow's shoes, which his wife later melted down and converted to a pair of heels for herself. Selfish.
Power move.
Wow, war never changes.
And finally, I have to save the cutest one for last. Mana Ashida, the actress who played Mako as a child, had trouble pronouncing Guillermo del Toro's name, so he let her call him Totoro-san. And with that, we're gonna go into final thoughts. We'll start with Austin.
Even though fundamental aspects of this movie are kind of underwhelming for me, like its lead performances and parts of its screenplay, it's been 10 years and it doesn't look like we're getting more movies with robots the size of skyscrapers fighting giant monsters. And now with the Chinese market sort of closing its doors to a lot of American films, this seems like a miracle that might not ever be repeated. Pacific Rim may go down in history as the biggest, wettest robot film to ever come out of Hollywood. A rare breed, gone before its time, the colossal dream of an absolute madman, never to be reproduced.
PMC, final thoughts.
This is one of those films that is such a loving homage to a variety of things that I imagine you could regularly revisit it and notice new things, make connections like the one I had just mentioned, and it sort of is a gift that will keep on giving, even if some things are kind of silly. Every car in this film looks bad. That's okay though. Cars are bad. I don't mind that. You can overlook minor things like that, and you can still see, all the love that went into it, and really get something new coming back to it every so often.
Ethan, final thoughts.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty exceptional entry in the world of robot media, and it really is just an incredible feat that Del Toro was able to make it, period. Apparently under budget and in the tightest shooting schedule of his career. I think it has its issues. I think the characterization, and there's some odd things in here, but just as a work of, spectacular candy-colored mecha action, and as a clear love letter to, classic kaiju cinema, robot animation, effects films of Ray Harryhausen, etc., etc. It's just such a marvelous sort of treat, and endlessly watchable, I would say. Good movie. Watch it. Watch Robot Jocks, but also watch Pacific Rim.
All right, Cody, final thoughts.
I really like what you said, Ethan. Endlessly watchable. I agree. Whatever criticisms you may have of this movie, at the end of the day, it is kaiju and smashy giant robots, and you really cannot go wrong with that formula. It would be good.
A tale as old as time. All right, Joe, final thoughts.
I will always champion award-winning art directors to cash in and just make dumb, fun action movies that they've always wanted to make. I hope they're a little less like Tenet, though, and I hope they're a hell of a lot more like Pacific Rim, because Pacific Rim is an absolute fun time from beginning to end, and it just gives you exactly what you hope for a movie like that.
Hell yeah. My final thoughts. This is a great time. I'm glad we were able to talk about it. I always enjoy revisiting Pacific Rim. It's just such a fun exercise in giant robots versus big monsters. I think it does it better than a lot of the movies that have come out since. If you haven't seen it, go check it out, give it a watch. I'm sure you'll have a good time with it. But you know who else is a good time? The person watching/listening to us on Bomb Squad Movie Night. If you are listening on any of the audio platforms, please give us a review or a thumbs up, just some kind of interaction. And if you're watching this video on Spotify video, we hope you enjoyed all of our f***ing curse words, uncensored. How about you go down to our Patreon and send a few bucks our way so that we can make more cool content for you. If you're watching this on YouTube, please go watch the Beau Was Afraid episode. That got kneecapped the day after it came out, and it did not get proper views. And it's a good episode. Austin worked hard on it. But before you go watch the Beau Was Afraid episode, comment below and let us know. What's your favorite kaiju movie? What did you think of Pacific Rim? What did you think of the things that came after Pacific Rim? Have you ordered the Pacific Rim at Mellow Mushroom? You should. She got it one time. I had a little bit. It was good.
It's very good.
Comment below and let us know this important information. While you're down there, hit the like button if you like the video. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more. Hit the bell icon to get updates on when we upload stuff. I want to thank my guests for coming on the show today. Cody, of course, thank you for coming once again. Would you like to plug your YouTube channel?
Sure. I have a K-pop reaction YouTube channel that I took a temporary, but longer than planned break from. New content will be coming soon.
Hell yeah. PMC, thank you for coming on the show. Would you like to plug your stuff?
Yeah, sure. So you can find me doing two main things. One is Twitch streaming, twitch.tv/PMC Trilogy. I generally play mech games and other weird things like the canceled soldier game for the 1998 Kurt Russell movie, among others. So if you enjoy that kind of content, if you enjoy speedrunning, check that out. I also help co-host Giant Robot FM, a podcast that I run with my buddy Steven Hero, where we talk longer than we should about mecha anime and other adjacent media. You can find that at Giant Robot FM, pretty much on any podcast platform. You can pretty much find me at PMC Trilogy on YouTube, Twitter, as long as it exists, and then Giant Robot FM also on Twitter, as long as it exists.
Yeah, thanks again, both of you, for coming on. Tune in next week when we talk about some turtles. Talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem, hosted by Tanner. It's gonna be a fun time. Thank you for tuning in, and remember, you dig giant robots. I dig giant robots. We dig giant robots. Chicks dig giant robots. Farewell.
Nice.
Today we are canceling the
Bomb Squad.
空にそびえる黒金の城スーパーロボットマジンガー Z 無敵の力は僕らのために正義の心をファイルダウン